Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And I love it. Promoter 101. Yeah, I love it. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And I love it. Promoter 101. Yeah, I love it. Promoter 101.
Hi, this is Heath Miller.
Becca Leifer.
Ed Mike Cohn.
Derek Dimmenstein.
Jason Kupperman.
Jason Miller.
John Schur.
Marcia Flessick.
Mike Fruitman.
Ricardo Bacco.
Peter Schwartz.
Nick Storch.
I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
I'm on Promoter 101.
You are tuned into the Promoter 101 Podcast Network, and we are broadcasting live, well, pre-recorded, of course. I'm Dan Steinberg, joined by W. Luke Pierce.
Very excited for episode 239 of Promoter 101. For our featured interview this week, we have the CEO of Zamora Live, David Zamora, who's going to enlighten us on the Latin concert market across the U.S. from mom and pop hard ticket outlets to national tour deals.
Plus, we'll catch up with the news of the week with Dave Brooks joining in as special guest reporter, giving us the insights to all the exciting news out there this week. And there's lots going on, Luke.
Love to have Dave back on the podcast. It's been a while since I had him on here. Always great to hear from him, get his thoughts on what's going on in the world. The Promoter 101 podcast starts right now.
This is John Schultz.
Tom Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks.
Dave Ratner.
John Holiday.
Ted Bicknell.
LX.
Imong Shaw. Elliot Lefko.
Gerald B. Henley.
Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox.
Joe Escalante.
Blair LeBlanc. Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon.
Nick Farkas.
Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
There's a bunch of Promoter 101 episodes available. Actually, Luke, all of them are available. You can get them at promoter101.com.net or anywhere that you get your podcasts from.
And of course, we're always in the conversation online. You should come join us on X. The show is at Promoter 101. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan is at The Jew. Over on Instagram, the show's at Steiny Promoter 101. Dan's at Dan Presents, and I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Reach out. Feel free to hit us up with your ideas and questions at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli.
Addie Ann Tarleton.
Paul Lohr. Phil Rodriguez.
Rick Greenstein.
Donatas Nachayos.
Drew Pellet. Rich Mills.
Sasha Bombaji.
Seth Hurwitz. Steve Martin.
Whitney Bond.
This is Trip Brown.
Wayne Forte. Steve Zapp.
Trevor Solomon.
You live on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
News of the month. We've got a special guest, an old friend of the podcast, industry writer extraordinaire, Dave Brooks. Welcome back to Promoter 101. There is so much going on in the world. We needed some professional help to dig into all of this.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back. I'm happy that the podcast is back. You guys have been back at it for a little while. I am more than honored to be a guest today.
Dave, I got to give a shout out to what you've been doing in the past couple of weeks as well, too. You've kind of taken to social media a little bit more actively and since December and have kind of been commenting a little bit more publicly. Feels like the old, amplified, Amp the Mag days. How's everything in your world, man?
You probably heard, as everyone's gonna heard, I was let go from Billboard at the end of last year, which was a little bit sad because I was there for 9 years, but it was an opportunity to kind of start some new stuff, and I'm finalizing talks for a new gig, which I'm going to be hopefully locking up soon, and I'm doing more of my own thing. I'm looking at creating something kind of similar to Amplify. I'm called Decibel. I haven't told anybody this yet, but I even launched my own podcast called Decibel and Docket, and it's business news and legal news. And I co-host the show with my friend Mike Seville, who's a lawyer. And we talk through kind of big entertainment law stories. We just started, but you can check us out at our website at decibelanddocket.com.
Decibelanddocket.com?
Yeah.
Okay, and how often does a new episode come out?
We've got 2 episodes. We're a weekly show.
Cool.
Why settle into that kind of intersection of, legal in the music business? What drew you to that space?
Well, my co-host is a lawyer. That was part of it, But also, I just think there's a lot of stories in the courses of that I want to explore more. And I think those are kind of chance to kind of deep dive into what's going on. Everything from crime stories to, the antitrust lawsuits that are happening, right? Just a chance to dive in more and explore them more and understand them more.
Excited to listen in. The decibelanddocket.com podcast coming out every week.
Nice. Congratulations on the podcast. Welcome to the space, my friend. Let's jump into the stories. What's first, Dave?
So this first story I just love because it comes at us right out of the agent versus promoter Instagram account. The story is about Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. She confirmed to reporters recently that she sent a diplomatic note to South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, who I hope I'm saying her name correctly. This head of state reached out to another head of state to ask for help with an important international request. She wanted help getting more BTS dates for Mexico. Specifically, the band's 3 shows all sold out in Mexico City. BTS is back. They come back together after all doing their military service, acquired under South Korean law. They announced a world tour. They added 3 dates in Mexico City. 1.1 million fans queued up to buy about 150,000 tickets. As we know, any super hot band, the tickets were gone in about 37 minutes, leaving a lot of BTS Army fans disappointed in Mexico. Feeling the pressure, I guess, from the BTS Army. Sheinbaum said, things were kind of reaching a boiling point in the country. And, that prompted her to not only to kind of reach out to the Mexican promoter, which in this case is OCESA, and kind of demand answers, but also to reach out to the government to somehow push BTS to do more shows in Mexico. While we don't know exactly what the South Korean president said her exact words, I understand it was to the effect of, unfortunately, the entire tour is booked up and there's no more shows to be added. So despite their best efforts, Mexico's going to have to settle for these 3 concerts. Maybe we'll see this brought up at the UN in a few weeks. I don't know.
Is there any not precedent, but history where world leaders have kind of used music in some sort of cultural exchange to open up conversations for this sort of stuff?
Well, famously, bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica were some of the first to play behind the Berlin Wall in the Soviet Union, right? Originally, those shows were done at the behest of these communist leaders to basically make people happy in the country. And of course, some people say those ultimately led to the downfall of communism and then the fall of the Berlin Walls. I can't think of an instance where one world leader has reached out to another world leader for help with the concert. It would be one thing if Claudia Sheinbaum reached out to Hybe, right? The Scooter Braun-led company that manages him. But she literally reached out to another head of state for help. I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
In a lot of parts of the world, you see government getting very involved with what the content is on pop stars that are coming into their market, what they're wearing on stage, what they're able to say, and the stricter and stricter governments around the world that have heavier rules and laws that would put either the promoter or the artist in jeopardy for breaking said rules are very hands-on with shows. So obviously government does get involved in a lot of these cases, whether it's just visas or talking about content, but the idea of not only welcoming the artist in, but trying to expedite bringing in additional dates and grow the economy and grow the artist tour, I think it's a good sign. I think it's a welcome sign from the industry that we would love the help of the heads of state to bring more entertainment in easier and smooth the way. Seems like a great thing for everybody involved.
And I guess too, how much of this do you posit that some of this interaction of another world leader who's famously been at odds with Donald Trump, reaching out to another world leader that's an ally that's had some run-ins with Donald Trump in the last 18 months. How much of this is that kind of foil effect that's out there in the world, kind of just dunking on Trump a little bit?
I don't see me reaching out to Donald Trump for help with any concerts, I wonder how much pull Trump has. I wonder if he could even get 2 tickets for a Rascal Flatts concert, at an amphitheater, right? He's definitely not pulling BTS.
Yeah, there's probably plenty of people or plenty of places, and this kind of maybe fold into some of the larger conversations about protests that are happening presently in America under the Trump administration, particularly around ICE, of artists kind of feeling threatened of performing, making fans and artists feel unsafe at this time. I think it's worth us veering down the road a little bit here in this conversation and talking about what's happened in Minneapolis this weekend and how the ICE raids and the shooting and murders that have been happening here are materially affecting the concert business, because it seems like it's going to have an effect. Dan or Dave, have you guys talked to anybody up in Minneapolis this week?
I did get a chance to talk to our local office friends in the Midwest, as well as our friends at First Avenue. And talked to Nate about it today. Seemed like some shows on Saturday during the heavy protests were canceled at some of the First Ave venues out of an abundance of cautions, although Nate told me that it was a very peaceful protest and there were no issues, but business is normal and they're moving forward. I also talked to Rick Hansen at the Trust at Head and Pin, and we've got shows with him this weekend, and he said that they're doing their shows, and he advised us to hold the course and didn't see any issues, that it didn't affect the blocks that their venues are on, and they didn't have concern that that was going to be an issue moving forward, that things have been peaceful and mellow, and suggested that we hold the course and bring the entertainment to the market because people need a chance to relax and be entertained, and taking entertainment away from them would be a penalty, not something that they necessarily needed right now. So I thought that was all positive, that it's peaceful and they're suggesting that we do bring it and it's not as bad as they're making it out on TV, that Minneapolis, St. Paul is a peaceful place that is safe to come to from the boots on the ground, which was nice to hear.
Shows are important. It's not just materially important, I think, to business and to kind of schedule and execution of things, but I think it's important to kind of like bring people together in a time where things are a little shaky and rocky. And there are many more things in the world that unite us than the things that divide us. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing, that we have the ability to tap into culture and move culture in that way. And it's certainly a crazy and scary time. And safety's got to come first for artists, performers, for fans, for everyone that works the venue. But I still think there's a space for these things to happen. It seems like the show's got to go on.
Yeah, I mean, unless your artist is going to be a target on either side, right? Like if your artist is like some real pro-MAGA person, or your artist is outspoken on things like police shootings that to attract a lot of protests, and it's probably best just to stay the course and move forward with the show.
Yeah. Should we talk about some other interruptions happening in the Midwest this week as well, too? There's something like 235 million people affected by Winter Storm Fern, including my hometown of Nashville, where some 330,000 homes, about 92% of homes and businesses in Davidson County, Nashville, still do not have power right now. It's going on 2 days at this point. Sub-freezing temperature, trees down, lights down. It's really materially affecting the city here. I know it's a ton of labels, a ton of agencies all shutting down work for the day. I mean, some finding it impossible to work without a generator and working Wi-Fi. Certainly materially impacted the business side of things, obviously, with no one able to kind of access anything more than their phone and cellular. It makes work a little bit difficult. Shows obviously having a big impact. I think it's Ryman's going on rescheduling a couple shows I've noticed the last couple of days. But I know that Nashville's not just the only city that's under duress at this point. It's happening up and down between Nashville and Michigan. So you guys materially getting affected by this, Dan? You got some show counts coming down?
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta, we lost a Saturday and Sunday show due to the weather. Dallas, we were watching closely on our Thursday and Friday shows, but as we were watching, we got lucky enough to get those shows through. But my OKC show on Saturday night, the bus company recommended that we pull that down because we wouldn't make El Paso coming out of there. The venue very much agreed we should pull the date down immediately, and they didn't want their fans coming out and attempting to drive the road. So it was an interesting side where the bus company was ahead of the mix. The venue was worried about their fans braving the roads. Same thing I heard from the Atlanta venues. They were worried about the staff getting in. Even if the artist can make it, like, could the staff get there? Could we even open the doors? Should we open the doors? What was the right thing to do for the sake of the fans, for the sake of the staff, and the safest thing? So we moved some shows around. We lost some shows. We rescheduled some shows. But when you're talking about going from Oklahoma City to Atlanta, all the way up north into DC, you're seeing this as the biggest sheet of ice that the country has seen in some times, all simultaneously. And this is a huge effect. My Nashville office was not only closed today, but my partner was working from a hotel room with his dogs, and a tree fell on top of his car while he was trying to get out to make it to a hotel after his power went down, and he has no sunroof. So if you can imagine Jason Zink braving the ice sheet with two dogs, no sunroof, well, it's like too cold to get to fix the power, like down an icy sheet of road. It's just, it's fitting for Zink, right? I mean, it's exactly what you'd expect. But all those years living on top of a mountain in Evergreen, Colorado, setting up for good training for this stuff. But yeah, I think it's a moment where You're going to see the industry be very quiet this week as a lot of people are out without power, without the ability to pull off shows, and without the ability to do business. And we're all going to have to be a little patient while those people are dealing with some real life struggles, including acts trying to make it safely from city to city, and staff and fans trying to navigate the local elements too safely. Luke, are you in Nashville?
No, I'm in La Quinta, California. I'm very happy to be here, working remotely from the West Coast for the next week and through the Grammys, and then flying home next week as things thaw.
Well, there you go. What else is in the news, Dave? What's next?
Well, so I saw this item. I thought it was interesting. Hire/promotion, the flag for people. Ground Control Touring has created a new position at the agency, a head of festivals role, and they've tapped longtime live music executive Keith Richards. No, not the Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, the Keith Richards from Wasserman Music, to run this new division at Ground Control. I spoke with Richard briefly. It's doing what we've seen other festival people do, agencies. I mean, I think of Josh Kerr first over at WME. Basically, what he's going to do is expand the festival placements for their roster of artists that includes Japanese Breakfast, Bright Eyes, Kurt Vile, Sonic Youth. He also is bringing with him Joy Hubbard from Wasserman to be the festival coordinator. I think it's always interesting to see kind of agencies, how they approach the territory system, right? They have a festival guy, while their agencies, everybody kind of handles festivals. His job's obviously not just to get inbound calls, right, for the big buyers, but also to get more artists on the rosters of big and small festivals. So if you are a festival talent buyer or booker, and you should reach out to Keith and introduce yourself, or give him a call, let him know, what you need. Well, this year's pretty wrapped up, spring and summer festivals, and you guys start talking about next year.
Keith, one of the great guys in the business for sure. An agent that nearly everybody loves. And I know that he was, after Wasserman, he was at Mary Kay Hughes' mandolin for a little while, tried his hand at that, returned to the agency business to go work with Heath and Matt and Steve over at Reliant. And now Ground Control, which seems like a roster, honestly, that an agent with Keith's talent, no offense to some of the rosters he'd worked with previously, I think will have a lot of festival action. It takes the right kind of shape and space and roster for these agents to be successful when you're just booking soft ticket things. Ground Control's got a great lineup of artists that can help festival buyers and coordinators curate some amazing music and performances on their stages. So I think we'll have a lot of luck over there.
So next story, it's always good to kind of hear from our congressional leaders and kind of learn about how little they know about the music business, right? 2 years back, we had the Senate hearing with Joe Bertzel from Live Nation, Jerry Mickelson from Jam Concerts, and the guys from SeatGeek. Well, now we're going to do round 2 of Senate hearings, and this time they got an A-lister to testify. None other than Kid Rock. Now, I don't know how you feel about Kid Rock as a musical talent. I tend to think that he's still a bit underrated. He can put on a hell of a show, but he's been around for a while, so you probably heard his material. But to get Kid Rock to testify before Congress, I don't see how that's not awesome.
It'll be interesting that who shows up to that. Is it Kid Rock or is it Bob Ritchie showing up to testify to the Senate? So I think those are two very different people and two very different characters. I think one actually does have a really sensible mind about business and certainly a subject area expert on some parts of the ticketing testimonies that have been made in front of the Senate that he could speak to.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a mix of both things, but it's just such a strange world in 2026 where we're seeing Kid Rock be the face of so many things that, I think 10 years ago, everyone would say there's no chance that would ever happen. So it's a weird world out there, Dave.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. He's also going to be joined by a yet to be named Live Nation executive. They might. Last time they brought out Joe Berchtold, who's fine.
It's fine for the president of the company. It's a pretty good get.
Right, but I would prefer them to bring out the new Ticketmaster president, because I want to hear what he has to say. The hearing is going to be chaired by Marsha Blackburn, who participated in the last Senate hearing. That hearing, though, was convened by a subcommittee on antitrust, right? This one is the Senate's Consumer Protection, Technology, and Data Privacy subcommittee. Well, the thing to watch for, I think on this hearing is like, how long is it going to take them to like really kind of point the finger at like ticket scalpers and resellers is kind of really being the cause of like so many problems in the business, right? I mean, we always see them take shots at some Live Nation people, and we've kind of heard all the arguments before, but I really hope that they like kind of, bring some scrutiny to kind of the resellers. I'd like to see somebody from the resale world kind of try to defend, some of practices, I hope this is an exciting one and let people tune in.
We'll all have to pay attention to that, see exactly if Kid Rock lives up to the hype or if he lets you down.
I hope he doesn't.
We'll have to get you on the podcast next month, Dave. Talk more about this, do a revisitation of this one when it does come back together.
The last thing we got, which I just thought this was interesting, I can get my kid to listen to this podcast because he plays Roblox, and specifically this game, Steal a Brain Rot. Are either of you guys hip to Italian brain rot?
I've heard of Roblox brain rot just as a concept in general.
Well, right. Well, there's brain rot as a concept, right? But then, of course, there's also someone created a whole meme universe and they call them Italian brain rot. And their characters with names like Traloleo Tralala and Cappuccino Assassino. And they're just nonsensical, like Latin sounding names that like the kids that got into. It's almost kind of like just to torment parents, like who have to know what their kids talking about brain rot games. But the reason I bring all this up is because the Steal a Brain Rot mini game, which is one of the most popular games on Roblox, hosted a virtual performance by Bruno Mars that was logged into by 12.8 million users. And that, by the way, is 12.8 concurrent users at once. All the social media content tied to the concert in total generated 53 million views. And so we've seen concert appearances by artists, Travis Scott on Fortnite. This is the biggest one ever for Roblox. And if there's a way to get into that world, maybe it's something we should explore it, guys.
Well, there's something to be said for the fact that Bruno is selling tickets at a level that no one has ever done before. Like, he is back, and for a guy that hasn't been on the road as a solo headliner for a decade, went big, and the demand was there. It was impressive.
Yeah. What a strong start to the year, too.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for breaking down the news for us this month, this week, this day on Promoter 101. Feels like old times here on Promoter 101 with Dave Brooks.
Man, it feels great. I'm so happy and honored you guys have me back. I love doing it.
Hey, it's Mark David.
Steve Strange, Toby Leighton Pope, Stuart Galbraith,
Simeon Galperin.
I'm Ralph James,
Ted Cohen.
Julia Frank.
Jeff Goodman. Jamie Adler and Frank Wing.
Doug Edley,
David Klein.
Stephen Riff,
Tom Chauncey.
And we're on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
It's not, of course, an episode of Promoter 101 without seeing what Dan has to say. Some tweets of the month. Start with this one. A new year means all new levels of failure to come. Just kidding. Get out there and create some new business, friends.
A new year is equal for all new opportunities. Let's bring it on.
Speaking up. It's a good day to stand up and speak up.
Never a bad idea to make yourself stand out, Luke.
No doubt, Dan. I thought that was something a little bit more political. What are your goals for 2026, work and personal?
Luke, what are your goals?
I would like to, in 2026, continue to get better care of myself from a personal perspective. I like to make sure that I find routine and try to at least have half the days in the year match some sort of routine, and more than half the days a year finding myself in a gym somewhere. If I can do those things, I feel like it'd be a great year, and I'll feel less burnout than I do typically every December when you see me in Aspen, Dan.
Luke, I'd like a special challenge for the next episode. Instead of what's on my mind, I'd like you to tweet or post on socials for the next month and us break down your thoughts for the month.
I'll accept the challenge. I think it's a good time for me. I've been very quiet on social media for about 4 or 5 months. I'm just creeping around as not an active creator of content, more of the consumer side of things. But I think it'd be good for me to jump back in the game, Dan. So I'll get after it.
Challenge accepted. Game on.
Hello,
Hello, this is Sarah Mertz.
Rick Barrow.
Nick Light.
Mark Geiger.
This is Lee Anderson. Kevin Lyman.
John Giddings. Jim Runge. Jeff White. Brian Zisk. Chuck Randall.
Brian O'Connell.
Andrea Johnson.
Adam Parsons.
Darielle Hyatt.
Ben Mensch.
Jamie Miller.
Billy Wayne Davis.
Brandon Frankel.
Mitch LaFon.
Jake Gould. Gary Smith. Jeff Cohen.
You are on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
This month's feature is CEO of Zamora Live, David Zamora. He's going to enlighten us on the Latin concert market across the U.S., from dealing with mom and pop hard ticket outlets to national tour deals. David Zamora, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Great. Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for this.
So I had the distinct honor of sitting in the audience listening to you speak at Aspen Live this year. And you blew me away on the differences of the subtlety between the standard rock and roll business of live and Latin, and some of the things that you have to deal with in order to have a successful business and cater to your artists on the highest level. And I'd really love to share that with our listeners over the next few minutes, if you don't mind indulging me. But before we get into that, can we talk about how you found your way into the music business in general? Can you give us a little history?
Yeah, for sure. So my dad actually started in this business almost about 40 years ago when my parents first came to the United States. They actually moved to Chicago from a little small town outside of Monterrey, Mexico. They opened up a restaurant in the suburbs of Chicago. And, as they were trying to get things going, they started to book bands in the basement. Eventually, he just realized that, hey, there's actually more money in booking bands in this basement and charging, cover at the door than the restaurant business. And that was kind of the start of his adventure into the music business. Started to do some artist representation, started to kind of book shows in different cities in the Midwest and, going out to like Minneapolis and in Omaha and Detroit and Indianapolis, and then eventually over to the East Coast to New York. And as the years went on, he's continued to chip away at the business, became a bigger promoter in the scene. Back in those years, it was just him and maybe a couple people. But, as the years went on, continued to grow the business, bought into, venues and radio stations. Fast forward to, when I was graduating from school, it wasn't so much of a choice. It was more so like, hey, you're going to kind of, need you to come work for the business. So, took a stab at working on some of the radio stations that we were owners of, spent some time on the road with one of the artists that we represented, and, just really started to get my feet wet in the business. I've always been around it growing up, going with my parents to shows. I'd work the door, put up posters, things like that. For a few years, I was a sound engineer with training on hand at the venue. And yeah, that was kind of my first steps into the music business and really just, getting to understand what this whole world was about.
Nice. Now, how many shows are you guys doing a year?
On average, I think we're around 900, 1,000. Arenas and theater shows, we're in the few hundreds. We do a lot of club stuff, a lot of outdoor stuff, rodeos and festivals. We own and operate some venues on the East Coast. So we're around, 800, 900, 1,000 a year.
Incredible amount of volume for any independent to be doing. What percentage of that is in your owned and operated venues?
Probably less 10%. I think the majority of the shows that we're doing are venues that we're going out and we're renting, clubs and ballrooms or theaters and arenas,
Four-walling about 800 shows a year across America. That is just an insane amount of volume. How many employees are working at this point for your company?
Right now, for Zamora, I think we are around 60, 70 people. We have an office in New York. We have an office in Detroit, Michigan. We have an office in LA. And then we also have an office in Puebla, Mexico. They do a lot of our digital design and, marketing, tour support, things like that. Plus, that's just for Zamora. The venues that we own and operate, it's just other separate businesses. They have their own staff, own teams. They run independently.
It's a massive size firm and kind of flying under the radar of the normal promotional industry in general, right?
Yeah, I think Latin has flew under the radar for a very long time. And I think people are just, really starting to understand what Latin is. There's been a lack of understanding of everything that Latin is and all the business that goes on. There's such a big industry, and a lot of it goes on in the clubs and in outdoor venues that are just off the radar. But there's a lot of business and it's definitely big.
And historically, there's been a couple of big crossover artists, right? It's like you had Maná, Santana, that clearly was more of a mainstream act, but played both sides of the hill. Selena y los Dinos clearly was the act that was breaking through 30 years ago to that moment. when she passed away, but there was a moment where that existed, right? So those things lived. But very little was messed with by the mainstream promoters. You guys had 95+% of the business to yourselves amongst the Latin promoters that understood what you were doing and understood the acts, which is basically an entirely different language because it is another language.
Yes.
And there are more to it than the 5X. I mean, you have your own Grammys, and it's made up of many different parts of the world and the map that all live in this framework. It's not just one set of people in one particular country.
Yeah, I think that's one of those, misunderstandings about Latin music. And I think some of that just goes to the lack of exposure of Latin artists outside of sort of our world. I think you touched on it. There hasn't been a lot of crossover artists, and the artists that a lot of times people are familiar with. Whenever I run into somebody or meet somebody and I'm like, oh, I'm a promoter in the Latin world, it's those questions, right? It's like, oh, do you do Santana, Gypsy Kings or things like that? It's like, well, no, these are the artists that we work with. There's so many different acts. They're all targeting a different part of the Latin world. I mean, you go to Puerto Rico and it's a completely different, rhythm and style of music than Mexico. And, you go down to South America and it's a different style of music, and they all have their own different flavors of Latin music. I mean, to somebody that doesn't, maybe speak Spanish, a lot of it might sound the same, but it's incredibly different. Even within the countries, I mean, there's different styles of music. I mean, within Mexico, music from the northern side of Mexico, norteño music, it's different from the central part of Mexico, which is more banda. There's sonidero, there's tropical genres of music, bachata, reggaeton, salsa, merengue. They're all different and they all target a different customer. If you're promoting Romeo Santos, it's a completely different audience than Los Tigres del Norte. Yes, there's some similarities and some crossover, but it is a different audience, and understanding that, is really important as a promoter.
Okay, and this is one of the things that caught me in Aspen.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys were talking about a big part of your hands-on promotion and involvement with your fans is you'll do signage in 2 languages. So your fans can be reached out to and they feel comfortable in the venue, but you guys make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of working with the Latin community. I think, for many years, the Latin music industry sort of sat on the outskirts of, the broader music industry. I think a lot of that was just some of the hesitation of Latin customers to go into more well-known or more established music venues. I think there was, a big comfort component. I mean, you got to remember back 20, 30 years ago when, a lot of these communities were starting to grow in the U.S. Many of the people here either spoke little English or they didn't speak any English at all. So, if they were going out, they wanted to go somewhere they felt comfortable. So where was that? It was clubs inside of the Latin communities in each city. It was very much targeted specifically in the Latin community. And I talked a little bit about Aspen about, the history of the baile, which means dance in English. And, these events, they were really community events because there wasn't a lot of Spanish entertainment that this group of people would feel comfortable going to, so this was really the gathering, the community event. And obviously it has roots in their countries of origin. Dances were the way that people got together and listened to music in those countries. So when it comes to where we're at today, these communities have started to assimilate more into the general music market, but there's still very much that need to kind of speak to these customers in the way that they speak themselves. So many people think, oh, well, it's Latin music. Well, yes, it's Latin music, but there's so many different segments within Latin music, and you really have to be able to distinguish each one.
You have a population that doesn't necessarily have a credit card. Some of them don't have a cell phone, and some of them don't have smartphones if they do have a cell phone. So you're dealing with having to sell tickets to people that can't necessarily buy tickets through the normal mainstream. And that pushes you back to hard tickets in some cases and physical brick and mortar outlets and mom and pop stores. Am I right?
Yeah. We talked about this at Aspen a little bit about meeting the customer where they're at. A lot of the Latin community, I mean, they still like purchasing things with cash. There's something about, having something in your hands that I think is really important within the Latin community. With a lot of our shows, we're still doing consignment tickets. We're taking tickets to mom and pop stores.
So with the mom and pop stores, you're trusting them with your money. How often, and I asked you this in Aspen, how often do you get fucked by the local mom and pop store? Because it's not like you're showing up to beat them up. You're not in the market. So How often do you get screwed on that because you're trusting these small random mom and pop stores with your tickets?
Yeah, it happens from time to time, but I will say that it's not something that is as frequent as you might think it would be. The stores that we tend to work with, and we've been working with them for many, many years. So there's a relationship there, and there's sort of an understanding of, hey, we're all sort of in this together. There's, a mutual benefit to, bringing the customer into their store to go and purchase a ticket for the show, and us being able to get that customer a ticket in their hands. Again, we're meeting them where they're at. A customer likes to go in and, while they're doing their shopping, they might be, purchasing, groceries or, paying their phone bill at the store, paying utility bills at the store, and they're picking up a ticket for the show while they're at it. And it's right there. It's convenient and it's at an accessible price. We want to do our best to get the customer an accessible ticket.
I get it. I'm in a place where I have people jumping into my DMs to sell me talent now. I have people emailing me. I have people texting me. I have people calling me. The only thing that I feel like I've lost is no one's faxing me anymore. But I'm seeing people try to do business with me in several different places. And if I want to be competitive at this point, I have to go where the person that has the content is to buy that content. And if I had to use smoke signals to buy fucking shows, if that's how revenue worked, I would figure out how to do it.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point there. And I think sometimes, as promoters with the growth of digital media now, it's so easy to just say, okay, I'm just going to put something on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the medium that you choose. But again, it's about standing out and it's about getting in front of people. And that makes a difference. I mean, I think as promoters, we're working on the margin. So all of that little extra work that we do to get our show out there, get it in front of people, it makes a difference at the end of the day. And it can make the difference between, making a buck on the show or breaking even and losing.
All right, so let's talk about how the game has changed. It has gotten so big, not just Latin playing for Latin. You're seeing stadium shows being performed in different languages now internationally. And here you're seeing it because these acts have gone to the next level. The success they've had internationally because of the internet and the growth of this music has changed, and it's a paradigm shift in the space. And with that attention has brought the big boys into the space, right? So Live Nation is promoting those shows. AEG is promoting those shows. Niederlander is promoting those shows. Is it more competitive now to get the talent because it's so much bigger, or do rising tides raise all boats here? And it's a bigger business for you as well, even though the big boys are now swimming in your pond.
I think the answer to that is yes to both. Business has gotten more competitive. I remember, even just 5-6 years ago, especially right before the pandemic, the deal sizes were nothing in comparison to what they are today. I mean, $1 million deal, 5 or 6 years ago was a big deal. Now $1 million deal is like, it might just be another few shows.
When you're talking about $1 million deal, are you talking about a single night? Are you talking about a run? Like
both. It could be, a run. It could be, the guarantees have changed immensely in the last 5 or 6 years. And a lot of that has to do with, one, the growth of Latin music and the attention from other promoters and from the big boys.
What would you consider 10 years ago to be a big guarantee for a single night arena show? You don't have to say a name of an artist, just in general. What was a big guarantee that you thought twice and double checked everything before you sent it, numbers wise?
Oh, $100,000 was like, that's a big guarantee.
Okay, $100,000. And then today, a single show, regardless of how many dates you're buying on the road, what's the big number for a big act that you double check and everything on the offer before you send it now?
And now $1 million is a big deal.
For a single night?
Yeah, for a single night. That's like, okay, we really got to do our homework here.
That's a 10x change in the growth of your business and the industry in general in a decade, basically, right?
Yes. Going back to your question, part of that is the competition that's come in, more players with bigger pockets, willing to make offers. But also, I think, at least for us, we've been able to continue to grow because of that growth at the same time. We've grown in touring, we've grown internationally, and that is because of the growth of the genre overall.
Okay, so we're going to prove how green I am in your space right now. And I will bookmark this with, I've never promoted a Latin show because I've always felt it's literally a different language and I don't know how to interact with your fan base. And me getting involved with a genre that I don't understand is taking food off of somebody else's plate because somebody can do it better. They're going to make more money for the artist. They're going to serve the artist better. They're going to do it better. It's not where I belong. So I am green when it comes to Latin, and I'm admittingly so. Same thing with EDM. There's certain things I don't know how to do. It's so far from what I do. I've never gone there. And I respect the guys that know that space and wouldn't try to compete with them because it is a completely foreign space to me. With that said, who are the artists that are your main core that you work with over and over?
So our main core has always been regional Mexican music. Now the name is being transitioned to just Mexican music in general. We grew up promoting artists like Los Tigres del Norte, Bronco, Los Temerarios, Banda La Arrolladora, Banda MS, the big acts in regional Mexican. That was really our staple for many, many years. As we continued to grow in the business and got more involved, we started to get involved in other types of genres of Latin music. We promoted Raúl Alejandro's first U.S. tour. We did Mike Towers. We did Anuel. That was a really big tour for us. And we've done a lot of shows with other artists, and we've worked with Marco Antonio Solis, with Romeo Santos. But regional Mexican music has always been our core.
And what will be the core artists you'll be dealing with in 2026?
For 2026, we actually had to reprogram a little bit. Part of that was due to a lot of the issues with immigration and visas for artists. We had a lot of artists that lost their visa and that we had tours lined up for. But we actually had to retool a little bit. There was a couple projects that were really big projects that we were chasing for a year or two, and we were lucky enough to land one of those, and that was Ricardo Arjona. That's going to be, I believe, a massive tour for 2026. It already is a massive tour right now. We're going to do Ricardo Montaner, where there's a few other artists that we're working on. We're really trying to branch outside of just specifically the Mexican music and really expand into all the other Latin genres. There's a lot of growth in the newer artists that are coming up. You've got a whole new wave of reggaeton right now with artists like Roa, Chris MJ, Chencho Corleone. We have a tour that we're working on with Roa right now. I think he's going to be one of the next big artists in that space. And that's really where we see the future. We know that there's a huge, young Latin audience, and we really want to tap into that with our programming.
So your game has changed. You've got a much bigger market, but you also now have the consideration of, can we get them into the country? Which I think is a global problem for anyone that is an American. I don't care if you're Canadian, if you're Spanish speaking, if you're coming over from Britain. Getting into the US is a challenging thing, and it's affecting artists of all scales. I mean, Cat Stevens just canceled a US tour because he couldn't get into the country. Can't think of a more reputable mainstream artist than Cat Stevens, right? But I think that's something you're going to see historically moving forward is it worth their time to even try? And maybe some acts are going to be gun shy. America's a pretty big market, and I get it's worthwhile to probably try. So I'm guessing we're not going to see a ton of artists fare away from that. But it seems like it's an added headache.
Yeah, it definitely has been. And it was for us, especially this year. We had a lot of tours that were lined up that we had to cancel because their visas got canceled. And in some situations, you had Latin artists that were already here inside of the U.S. and they were asked to leave the U.S. even with the visa in hand.
They had the visa and they were still asked to leave?
Yes, correct. There are a few artists that were, prominent artists that received notifications that they needed to leave the country.
It was officially revoked. Well, I didn't realize they were going past the point of not approving them, that they were actually taking them away from people that already had them.
Those were limited cases, but there were some of those cases where, people were being asked to leave the country. There was a lot of cases of artists just being denied their visas.
Are you getting shows on sale before you know if the visa's been approved or not at this point?
At this point, no. But for months, we had no idea what was going on.
Blowing venue deposits and ad budgets on shows that you're later finding out aren't going to play and you're not able to get that money back?
Yeah, in the situations where we were working with artists that had visas, and then we later found out that they were being revoked. I mean, yeah, those shows were on sale, and we were marketing those shows, and then we had to pull them. And then we're not the only promoters that happened to. It was a real issue that we were dealing with, especially early on in the year. We were really just trying to figure out, who we could work with and who we couldn't work with. Now the dust has sort of settled. So you kind of know who has the visas, and at this point we're, especially if there's a doubt around somebody, we're asking for, proof of the visa, or we're waiting until post interview to make sure that they have their visas in hand in order to put a show on sale, because we don't want to be caught with that situation where we're promoting a show and we don't know if the artist is actually going to show up or not.
What a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
All right. What's the future of Latin music? Let's get past the current government administration. I have a feeling things are going to lighten up whoever's in office next.
Yeah, I do think that the future for Latin is very bright. I think that there is a very young Latin audience that is still starving for more music, maybe a little bit more assimilated than their parents. They still love Spanish language music. You see it with artists like Ivan Cornejo that are selling, multiple arenas in many cities, and numbers that surprise me when I look at their sales. I'm like, wow, I had 2 shows at the United Center in Chicago, for an artist that's primarily targeting, 23 years old and younger. People are going out and they're spending money and they're buying tickets and they're buying lots of tickets. And that to me is just really the tip of the iceberg, because I think that the young Latin audience is still a little bit underserved in terms of artists and content that are targeting them. I think you're seeing a lot of these new acts that are sort of fusing the American styles of music, whether it's EDM or country or hip hop, and they're fusing it with the Latin rhythms and creating sort of new types of music. Fuerza Regida is a great example of that, taking some of the more traditional Mexican music and fusing it with some of the younger likes like hip hop and R&B. And I think there's going to be more of that. You're seeing it in the EDM space. You're seeing, Latin artists kind of tapping into the EDM space. You have somebody like Karin Leon that is tapping into the country, space and fusing that with Latin music. I think that there's so much of an opportunity to still serve the customer and they're, this is a customer that's going to continue to grow. They're young, they're just getting into their careers, and they're going to be out there looking for entertainment.
It seems like a massive, massive field that's only getting bigger. Hard to argue that. I want to ask you a couple questions that makes me feel very green, but I'm going to ask them anyway. A big part of your audience, enough to fill 2 nights at the arena in Chicago, enough to sell out multiple stadiums in New York for Bad Bunny. They exist all over the place. A big part of this audience does not speak English. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think especially the older customers, they most of the times, they're speak little English, or they'll only speak some English. I see less people that don't speak any English these days than before.
You go to Little Italy, you're going to see a lot of people speaking Italian. You go to Chinatown, you're going to see a lot of people speaking some of the different dialects. I think there are a lot of people that speak both languages that live in the country. Feels like there is a solid population in the Latin world that lives in the United States that does not speak the language at all. And maybe I'm naive, but it seems like that would be really difficult to succeed living in a country where you haven't learned the language. And yet it's a population that does exist and seems to be able to figure out a way to survive without knowing the language. Is that fair? I'm really naive here. So if I'm...
Yeah, I think part of that is the availability of a lot of the Spanish language media here in the U.S. Yeah, I mean, you may not see it if you don't consume it, but there's Spanish language radio, there's Spanish language TV. You go into the Latin community, in the Latin communities in each of these cities, and you have everything available in these communities. You have grocery stores, there's schools. I mean, here in Detroit, there's a school that is a Spanish language, a primary Spanish language school in the city of Detroit. It's a community that has a very strong culture, and I think that the Latin community overall, really loves their culture and they want to keep the culture. And I think that's kind of reflected in the way that they live here in the U.S. I mean, you see a lot of people that are teaching their kids Spanish. They'll grow up speaking to their kids in Spanish and reinforcing the language at home. And I think that just is really goes to keeping the culture alive.
Sure. And I think being able to speak multiple languages is a massive sign of intelligence.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Is there a large part of your population that's living in the U.S. that's going to your shows that are your clientele that don't speak English?
I would say there's less these days, but there are still some people that do not speak English. But when I go to the shows, I still see people that, because, when I talk to people, you can tell that, they don't feel comfortable speaking English, or if they speak English, they speak a very little bit.
I always find it interesting when I'm traveling abroad and I'm in a place where I don't speak the language and I'm depending on them to speak English to make me comfortable, which is certainly a first world problem, but it's got to be tough to survive in a place where you don't speak the language. And it speaks to the resiliency of the people in general, that they can not only do that, but thrive in the culture and make a living and make a life here. But it just seems unique opposed to everyone else in the population base.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. When I'm at shows, I'll see a lot of people there that maybe they're struggling to speak the language, and plenty of times that I remember having to step in and translate something for somebody. They'll show up and they may not even know how to get their ticket on their phone. There's been times where I've had to help people. Hey, here this is how you get your ticket, or translate for them when they're talking to somebody at the box office because they're not exactly sure, how to communicate. So yeah, it is a challenge, but I think what you said is spot on. It just speaks to the resiliency of the people, and I think that's kind of ingrained into the Latin cultures. You just kind of keep going. Don't give up. You got to just keep working hard and figure it out. I think that's just, really ingrained into the culture and of the immigrants that came over here to the U.S. They came here to find a job and to build something for their family. And they really just had to figure it out. And that still persists today.
All right. And on the other side, you have a very thriving, very well-to-do population as well. And amongst the spectrum of the haves and have-nots, you have the people that can afford those beautiful VIP platinum package tickets up front, and then you have those very low price tickets in the back, and you have to scale all the way across. So I believe you've got, when you play the reserve seat shows and not the ballrooms, but you have a ton of different price levels to accommodate all of those different fans.
Oh yeah, and we've actually seen that sort of shifting throughout the recent years. I mean, coming out of the pandemic, I think the economy was different than what it is right now in 2025. I think there was more money, and people in all of the socioeconomic levels had money available to spend. Right now, I think you're starting to see that that difference a little bit more. We're starting to see the people that are fortunate enough to have the money to spend, and they're willing to pay the high prices, and they're willing to pay anything to get that front row seat and see their artist. And then you have sort of everybody else. It's becoming a little bit more that the have and the have not. And we're seeing that in the scalings and in the ways that the sales patterns, where we're having to open up more seating at the lower price levels to meet people where they're at right now. And we're
flexing prices just like we are on the A's.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think this year we've seen it a lot more than last year. I think this year we've had to get more aggressive on the lower end. We've had to get more aggressive with the lower price levels, and now with all-in pricing, I think we've even had to get even more aggressive, because I think that price that people see, if we had a $29 or $39 ticket when you would go in, there's no $29 or $39 ticket all now with the all-in pricing. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a psychological effect. I think we've had to continue to play with the pricing and figure out how to meet people at where they're at right now.
Is ICE hurting your ticket sales? Are you afraid is your fan base afraid they're going to show up at your shows and start IDing people?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a real thing. It has a real impact, and it's not just fake news. It has a real impact. We've seen it. We've had ICE show up at some shows where it has not happened often, but
if they show up at one, it's got to affect people from going to everything they're thinking about going to for a while if they happen to not be documented.
Yes, I think it's there's definitely a lot of fear that is going around in the community. We're seeing it in the sales, I think, in general right now.
If we were going to go to a concert, if it could uphold their entire life, right? It's just like staying in the hall. That's got to affect your business at the core.
Yeah, people are making decisions to stay home and to not go out. I mean, I have friends with different types of businesses, and they're 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 all telling me the same thing. Sales are down. People are afraid to go out. We have to, in a lot of cases, deliver things to people because they don't want to leave their house. It is a real thing. The fear is definitely real. And it's not even just a fear. I mean, you see it online, and people are, posting reels and videos of, people getting, taken into custody. That being said, I believe that, the Latin community has been very resilient. People are still looking for ways to, to get out and have some fun and kind of, forget about, some of the things that are going on, around them. I think, as humans, we all sort of need that escape every once in a while. And I think that our music, has served to kind of give people that escape. And one of the artists, Los Tigres del Norte, they've been on tour, this year through all of this. And, they speak a lot to the immigration issues that are going on right now. And I think it's things like that kind of continue to give people hope that, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to, this will pass, because I think we need that as humans. We need that light at the end of the tunnel to keep going and to keep fighting.
It seems like a challenging field to be in on top of the regular issues that we have with the business anyway. ICE, visas, language barrier, economy of scale, all in hopes to bring a little entertainment to some people that certainly work hard enough that they should be allowed to see a show. But it's an amazing thing, and I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know more about the business, and I appreciate you taking the time to educate not only me, but our entire Promoter 101 audience. And I thank you so much for taking time and talking to us today, right here on Promoter 101 with the one and only David Zamora. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Hey everyone, this is Cindy Leinott,
Bruce Solar,
Ali Spagnola,
Ari Herstand,
J-Bo Lewis, Michael Yerke, John Meglin,
David Ritz, Larry Butler,
Andy Gould,
John Finberg,
Kara Finkenberg.
Jonathan Shank.
You are listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Quote of the month comes to us from Margaret Thatcher. Probably her first time on Promoter 101, Luke, but let's set a new trend. Power is like being a lady. If you have to tell someone you are, you aren't. Like that one, Luke. That's awesome, Margaret Thatcher.
Go old Maggie Thatcher, the Iron Lady.
Hey, this is Mike McGinley, Mitch Rose,
Peter Katzis,
Mike Hayes, Tony from APA,
Vince Bannon,
Deshaun Healy,
Steve Rennie, and
Rick Canny,
Sam Kinkin,
Rob McDurf. Happy to be here on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Thanks for joining us for episode 239 of Promoter 101. We hope you enjoyed this. Thank you to our special guest, David Zamora from Zamora Live, Dave Brooks, Dan, Connor, everybody here at the Promoter 101 team. So excited that you're tuning in and listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'd love to hear from you. Hit us at steiny@promoter101.net with your feedback.
Thank you all for listening. We will talk again on February 26th and the last Thursday of every month moving forward.
Our February episode will feature the Manager Force's Randy Nichols. And in the meantime, we're wishing you sold out shows for the month to come.
Cheers.
Call your mother. Ba-da-ba-ba.